Hi, this is Pastor Randall Neal at Zion Lutheran Church, and today is Tuesday, October 27th, 2020, and this is time for our weekly devotion with you, and I'm very glad to be with you. Now, this is the time of year where we're just coming off of the baseball. We're in the few weeks of the football season. Some of our teams are winning, some of them aren't doing quite so well. But thinking about the baseball, the Twins this last year, boy, I had such high hopes for them. It was kind of fun to watch, even though it was a shortened 60-game season. And reminding us repeatedly of the World Series that our Twins actually won a number of years ago. And every World Series has its memorable moments. But one in particular I want to relate to, and that's back in 1989 World Series, because I think it has a distinctive claim to fame. The game was being played in Candlestick Park out in San Francisco. And maybe some of you were around might remember in the third inning, the ground suddenly started shaking. An earthquake had hit the stadium. Well, that got people's attention, of course. People began to run, and the players, they quickly left the field. Many suddenly only cared about one thing, whether the people they loved were safe. Well, the Giants catcher team that day, the Giants catcher's name was Terry Kennedy. He was living his dream that day. I mean, he was playing in the World Series. But suddenly, in one defining moment, that changed. Well, after the game, when a sportscaster inquired about his reaction to the quake, that catcher summed it up pretty well. He said, "Sure does change your priorities, doesn't it?" And we think, well, yeah, Terry, it did, and it does. Well, got to thinking about how circumstances in life change things. What are we in right now? I mean, the COVID-19, the pandemic stuff, the upheaval that's going on, the financial insecurity, jobs, schools, who knows what's going on and where we're going to end up. It's almost overwhelming, isn't it? And I know a number of folks are being weighed down by it, and that's discouraging. I know that. I want to talk a little bit this morning about how things can be looked at and how much of a difference our attitude can make. You know, hurricanes apparently I think we've had 10 so far this year, which is an all-time record of named hurricanes. And we've had more hurricanes this fall than in recent years. And it's been tough on those folks who are having to live through all the wind and the water, the destruction that hurricanes bring. And I grew up in Miami, Florida, and lived through a couple of those long time ago, but knowing the destruction that they can bring. Well, as I've been reading recently about the current, I mean, right now, as we're sitting here this morning, this day, about the many hurricanes taking place across our country, I got to thinking about how bad things were for Hurricane Katrina a few years ago down in Louisiana. Do you remember that? I mean, a lot of our Lutheran churches were affected by it, and we did a lot of appeal work throughout our church body to help those folks rebuild. Well, I remember reading in one of our Lutheran Witness magazines about some of our sister churches in the LCMS who had experienced the full force of that devastating hurricane. I remember reading about the churches and homes of church members whose homes were basically wiped out from floods that were caused by a hurricane. And the thought that kept coming to my mind was how disasters have a way of suddenly driving your life into two distinct columns. What do you think those are? The things that really matter and the things that really don't. The problem is, until a disaster hits, we tend to have them all lumped into one list, don't we? Where all of it seems to matter. Well, the hard times are God's reminder that a lot of those things on our list that we feel we just got to have and we can't live without really don't matter. Those churches down in Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina, they lost most everything. I remember reading in that article about one of those churches who lost their sanctuary. That's its pews, the piano, the sound system, its hymn boards, basically everything that congregation had. What intrigued me was that very next Sunday, do you know what those folks were doing? They were holding their worship service out on the field up the road from where their church building used to be. Incredible. They weren't moping and pouting and crying about it. No, they're not happy, of course. But these folks had come face to face with the reality that the real church, had been untouched by the flood. They got their act together. The brothers and sisters in Christ were out there praising God together in that field. And yet the props, they were all gone, weren't they? It hurt, of course it would, just as it would us. It'd be a struggle to restore what they had lost. But they had not lost the things that really mattered. Okay, the Apostle Paul, he understood this life's two-column concept. He talks about everything being in one of two categories. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 8, he talks about how hard hit he and his associates had been. He said, and I'm going to quote him, "We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." Those folks, my friends, were unsinkable. And you know why? Because they understood the difference between the stuff that matters, column A, and the stuff that doesn't, column B. What was Paul's advice to them? And by extrapolation to you and me today as we face our struggles because of COVID and the other things going on in our lives? Paul said this, "We do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles," did you get that? Light and momentary troubles. Yeah, they're heavy and they're real, but light and momentary are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, is temporary, but what is unseen and eternal. I wonder if we could take a lesson from Paul. What do you think? You see, Paul's troubles didn't defeat him or discourage him because he figured out the difference between what matters and what doesn't. And the things that matter are the things that last, that they're eternal. And those are the things you can never lose. If you keep your focus on those things, you can be knocked down, but you can't be knocked out. Don't wait for a disaster for you to see life's two columns. Make your list now, and you'll make a much better decision. You'll have priorities that you'll never regret. After the smoke clears, after we're released from the COVID-19 restrictions that we're under here in the church and you at home and jobs, hopefully you're remaining healthy. Hopefully things are going well with you. But after all the smoke clears, and be assured it's going to, it will. I don't know when. Hopefully sooner rather than later. But when that smoke clears, so to speak, there are things that seem so important formally that we now realize really aren't. Your earth stuff, your possessions, your business, your career, people's approval, even your house or your wardrobe. Many people have lost all of that and realized they still had the thing that really mattered, the things that lasted. So, my friends, if you're going through a time of loss right now, and I'm guessing most of us are in some category, would you please focus on the really important thing that you've not lost? That you are a son or daughter of Jesus Christ. You are a son or daughter who are going to spend eternity in heaven because of your faith relationship with him. You are the one whom God is using now to touch lives, whether it's immediate family, your neighbor, your friends. You have an opportunity to provide that witness to show that column A, the eternal things, are far superior to the column B of things that we lose. If your hard time is somewhere out there in the future, perhaps this is the time to make sure you're giving your best to that short list of lasting treasures. They're meant to be life's non-negotiables. Thanks for listening. May God be with you and encourage you in the days and weeks to come.